Welcome to the Five Thread Podcast. In this episode, we talk to Nicole Bekkers. Nicole is the founder of FC88, a pioneering and innovative company which works to upcycle professional sports apparel. FC88 partners with professional football clubs, federations, and their shirt sponsors to transform their old sports apparel into unique and handmade bags and other fan gear, reducing emissions and pollution and creating sustainable brand value and assets. Nicole has worked as the head of commercial strategy and business development at the Royal Dutch Football Association and as a member of the marketing advisory board at UEFA. In this episode, we talk about what actually happens to outdated sports apparel, how Nicole takes this and transforms it into something new, and the due diligence and integrity needed to make that happen.
First of all, very, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. So my background is in sports marketing, the commercial side of football, basically. I have been working with the Dutch Football Federation for 13 years almost. And it was in 2000, I must say it right, I think 16 or 17, when we didn't qualify with the men's national team for the World Cup in Russia, that I asked my kit manager, so this means we're not going to get the new kit, right? And he said, well, yes, we're going to get it, and we get it all. And normally you order 2 years in advance. So 2 years before that, we ordered, of course, with the back of our minds, qualifying for the World Cup, going to, knockout stage. So you buy into product until that phase. But we didn't qualify at all. So we ordered so much stuff that we weren't going to use the next 2 years. So that was my first real introduction in the issue of overstock, and specifically the whole business model behind it, that you order 2 years in advance, hoping to qualify for Euros, World Cup, maybe Champions League if you're a team. But of course, that's not granted. You don't know that for sure. So with that in mind, I started a little side project within the federation to see, okay, what can we do with the old kit? And first of all, of course, that was, can we give it away to people with, smaller budgets? Can we donate it to football schools in the Netherlands or abroad? And everything was no, that's not allowed by the contract. We have to either use it and then store it. And I felt that wasn't the end of the life. So, okay, and then after storage, what are we going to do with the stuff? And then, of course, he, with a very heavy heart, said, well, we have to shred it or incinerate the product once it's, becomes obsolete, basically. So I started out with a project where we created the laptop sleeve from it with a local studio as a Christmas gift in 2017. And, people were very happy with those bags. And I created my own little backpack with someone I knew. And that was basically the start for my FC88 dream, which became a side hustle. And then in 2020, a real business, fully working on that. Yeah.
But I think most people, when they listen to this, will be astounded that actually happens. I mean, can you kind of take us back and just explain why you have to order 2 years in advance? We know that this is a problem in terms of overstock, but can you explain a little bit about the supply chain as to why it takes that long?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, any kit supplier, doesn't matter which brand, they have to make sure that they can produce the volumes needed for the big football clubs and the big federations. So normally around 2 years in advance, they start with designing the product. So they're now designing the product for 2026. That will be the World Cup in the US. So, all the trends that are now in fashion or in football, they're going to put into that design. That whole product goes to a very important but also lengthy design approval process, first from the brand side, then from the federation side. Normally it takes around 2 or 3, maybe 4 rounds of approval when the final product is there. And that's just a digital design. Then they start sampling. Often they try out new materials or new innovations in the jersey. And then, of course, production starts, I think, 18 months before the actual delivery of the new product. The production starts somewhere in the Far East. and then the product will be delivered a month before launching the new jersey. So that's a lengthy process. Everything's of course shipped by boat, probably, so that takes a couple of weeks to months. So it's a very lengthy process, and they have to do that for every club, because a club gets a new kit every year. And somewhere in the last decade, we went from a home jersey and away jersey to a third kit, a fourth kit, a celebration kit, an anniversary kit, So there's more product coming in, which all needs to be designed and all needs to be approved. And yeah, so that's basically a very simple version of the whole process there.
And, I'm thinking from a commercial point of view, the amount of money lost in that must be massive. So to be able to still create some revenue from that resource, which otherwise would be burnt, or sent to landfill, it provides the club another kind of revenue stream, I guess. But did you find, when you kind of approach this idea with your stakeholders within the Dutch FA, that they were open to this, or did you find that actually there was some pushback? How easy was it to implement this?
Well, actually, within the federation, everybody got it straight away. Like, no one in the football industry likes to destroy product. That's I think, a valid point. It's just the commercial restraints around it from the contracts with the kit suppliers, who are often the biggest or one of the biggest financial contributors to the club. So if there was pushback in the beginning, it was mainly because what can we create that's not cannibalizing on the business model of the kit supplier, and that gives us some room to play with when thinking of reusing the kit or repurposing the kit. So everybody gets it, and I think that's still one of the big plus points from what we're doing. Everybody gets that this is a better solution than the current one. It's just commercial restraint sometimes that gets a little pushback, or it takes a little bit of time to get the approval from kit supplier to do it, or to test it out, or to create something new. But to be honest, from within the club or any federation, nobody is going to say, no, let's keep destroying product.
I mean, I think it's so refreshing to hear that, because we have had a history where these products would just have been incinerated. And I think unless you have pioneers like yourself to really show that there are other solutions, it can be very slow to change the game, even if you've got the right mindset.
Yeah, but also, I think one of the big things, and that's why we love to tell the story about what we found, not just to put FC88 front and center, but also because so many people within clubs don't know that this is happening. Mm-hmm. So I think in 85% of the conversations we have with new clubs or federations, we say, like, this is normally what happens with overstock. Most of the time their reply is, I don't know what happens with that product within our club. Let me check. And then the second meeting we have, they are like, wow, I didn't know that we were doing this. So there's also still, we call it a hidden problem somewhere, mm-hmm. because people don't know. I was working within the federation for 7 years already, was responsible for Nike and all the kit launches we did before that. And I never questioned what happened with the end of life product. Never. Until that moment that we didn't qualify. So it's something that people don't really think about. And I think that the whole sustainability movement puts a spotlight on that side of the business.
Yeah, and I guess when organizations are so large, they become quite siloed. The priorities of the commercial department is very different to the sustainability department. But I'm very curious to know what led you from kind of doing it as an internal side project to starting FC88. What made you take that leap?
I think two things. One was my own little backpack, which I still use. I started to bring to the office, to away games, to home games, just, bringing my laptop, and people replying every time, where did you buy that? Where can I buy it? So that was one, like, okay, there's something here. I like the product. Maybe other people do as well. The second thing I thought was when I just had the simple realization that, okay, at a federation, you get a new kit every 2 years. And a club gets it every year. So when I really zoomed out, and I just Googled how many professional football clubs are there in Europe, around 950, I'm like, oh my God. If a federation, and the Dutch isn't the biggest one, if you multiply that by 950 times, and that's each season, the volume of product. I'm like, and then of course, I also looked for, okay, who could help me out? Who is doing this already? And I found nobody. There was nobody doing this. There are still some very crafted and skilled people doing it on a one-to-one. You can send in your old kit and they make something very awesome from it. But I didn't find any really the initiative to bring it to the club and the federation, and then for them to take the spotlight with the upcycled apparel and their storytelling behind it. So I think those two things, just everybody liked my backpack, that was one. And two, when I zoomed out, I'm like, this is a major problem. Let's do something about that.
And it is also a big leap to go from an idea to actually setting this up. I've spent my career working in supply chains, and to set up ethical and sustainable supply chains is not an easy job, Nicole. And I know we've talked about this for a long time previously, but can you tell us a little bit about how these garments basically go from the club and end up as a unique, bespoke other item?
Sure. Well, my background isn't at all in sewing or anything in the production and the process of apparel. So for me, it was a completely different world. Maybe also good to be a little bit of naive when you're starting out. So I was looking actually for someone who could started out with a bag. Can you create a bag from this shirt? So I started out with finding as local as possible, bag manufacturers, Poland, Romania, Turkey, because I also knew to actually make this work on a bigger scale, we have to have good quality product, locally made. So we have a very transparent production way of, okay, we know that these people make the product and they get good pay for it and accept everything. But we didn't want product to be too expensive, because otherwise it would be too niche of a solution. So started out in Poland, then Romania, Turkey, and then ended up finally in Portugal, which is, of course, in Europe, one of the countries with the most sustainable look on fashion. But of course, there isn't a studio that actually does what we do or what we want to do. So every time again, we have to start crafting again. Okay, I have an idea. I want to have a bucket hat made from a football shirt. Okay, let's start designing and making samples. And it took me, I think, the first two out of the last 3 years to really set that whole system up as the way we want it. At the moment, we have 3 studios in Europe, one in the UK, opening in France and Northern Macedonia pretty soon. So now we have tech packs. A simple thing. We know exactly to create the same bag in all the same studios. We have, of course, a bigger organization behind us, so we can actually invest in the relationship with those studios. And the process is very upfront and transparent as well. A football club says, okay, I've got 500 jerseys with a defected logo on the front. We want to make a bucket hat of a laptop sleeve. It's being shipped to our studio, for example, here in Rotterdam. That is all hand cut, each shirt individually. The pattern is drawn onto it. It's hand cut, sewn back together piece by piece, and then shipped back to the club as straightforward as we can. It also means it's a very, handmade type of process, and very much craftsmanship that goes into that. But it also adds, of course, to the value of the actual new product, that it's unique by piece by piece.
And I know from speaking to you, you've done so much due diligence, not only on the integrity of the product, but also the social value that you add to, those studios that you've created. I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about that level of due diligence, because there's not many people like you, Nicole, who would go into that level of detail. But, in your interior linings of your bags, you don't use new fillings. You try and reuse as much as you can. And when I've spoken to you before, you talk about the people who are making these products, and you talk about their backstory and their history. So I just wondered if you could share a bit more around that, because I think that's quite rare. There's not many people who go into that depth of detail to make sure that the product is the best it can be.
Sure. So, of course, we could make a very cool bag from a jersey, ship it off to China. Someone would make it for, I think, half the price we're paying at the moment. And then you have an upcycled product. But it doesn't feel right to us that we would do it in that way. We want to have it local. because then we can also invest in the local community and give back to them. So, for example, the Rotterdam studio, a lot of them are refugees who are working there and single moms who were, a tailor by back in their home country, and now they're creating our products. The lining is made from old banners we use. The backside often is black, so that's a banner. The lining, the padding in between, we try to now recycle all the cutoffs of old jerseys into felt, and that felt goes into the bag again. The straps are often as we can made from old car seats, and the only thing we often have to buy or source externally are zippers or buckles to the bags. And I think the whole, it's not just upcycling a football shirt, it's then creating this as circular as possible product made ethically and locally by people who are actually proud of what they can make, and we are proud of them because they are the craftsmen. We're not. I can't work with with a sewing machine. And also, I got this very cool story. We did a very nice project in December with one of the biggest Italian clubs, and one of the tailors there, he went home to his kids and his wife, and he mentioned to his 11-year-old son, "I'm working for this club." And his son was so proud, like, wow, my dad worked for, can't say the club, unfortunately, but my dad works for that club. And he came back to the studio and he was telling me the story. And of course, this is an extra value that we didn't foresaw when we started working this way, but this is what it does for me, right? And just yesterday, we launched with FC Utrecht, a Dutch club, where they changed changed sponsor during the season. They had this very cool campaign where all the fans could swap their old jersey for the new one free of charge, and then we upcycled the old ones instead of then throwing it out. So there's so many examples of how to contribute to the community through upcycling or through that emotional value of the club and the jersey.
That's amazing. And I've never heard of a club doing that, to actually say, bring your old shirt back and we'll give you a new one.
Just for free, swap it over.
Yeah, that's incredible. And for them to be so proactive to actually think, we're going to take those old shirts, and instead of just getting rid of them or burning them, we're going to make them into a unique product. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the challenges that you faced in doing this, personal, logistical. Were there unexpected challenges that you came across?
How long do you have? Now, of course, it's for me, it's going into a industry I'm not familiar with. Of course, I know football very well, so that's where that's where the network comes from and introductions to the club. I think the biggest challenge was getting that production in the right way, which we wanted it, and now making sure that we can actually get all the volume in, because of often it goes into a wave of 4 or 5 big orders, and then you have to have all the people in who can actually make the product in the right quality. I think that still will be a very sort of balancing act, like getting more studios on board that can make the product we want, but not not supplying them with a good order. So it's always hand on hand. So we're opening hopefully in France pretty soon, because we think that's a big market, and we've done something with Monaco and Stade Rennais, etc. But yeah, we can't give them a certain order in advance because we make it on demand. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the balancing acts we have. The second one would be the brands. They are very happy with what we're doing because we're keeping their brand value alive. We're not Greenpeace saying like, oh my God, look at what the brand forces the club to do. And we don't want to say that, we want to collaborate with them. But it's also, of course, they're so big and it's a political issue as well. It's a very sensitive topic sometimes because it's their product and they're pushing it out on the market and they don't have a solution in place. And we're coming in this gray area of, okay, is a kit a Nike jersey with a Barcelona logo that's approved by Barcelona? Who owns that kit? Mm-hmm. Is it Barcelona or is it Nike? And it depends on who you're speaking with, and it depends on what you want to do with the kit. Who said, no, it's my kit? No, it's mine. So I think that's one of the challenges we have going forward as well. Are the brands moving into this area of expertise themselves? Can we make sure that we are the expert, and can we create a good position in that market because we're doing it locally, we're doing it in an ethical way, we're creating a cool product that we are there, pole position partner for the topic. I think that are the two major challenges at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an interesting question about where does the responsibility lie. I know there's a lot of EU legislation coming on board. Even who is the producer of that product? Does the responsibility belong with the club? Does it belong with the brand? Does it belong with the manufacturer? And I think it's quite an opaque area, and I don't think there's the answers at the moment. It's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. But I think the unique thing about what you're doing is that you are very transparent about it, and you're being quite open and kind of really addressing the problem head on. And I know one of the topics that you wanted to talk about was this sense of urgency with outdated sports apparel. I think people will be quite shocked when they think about the quantities involved. And I know we've talked before about the conflict of interest between this very linear business model that is essentially built on just selling more and more new jerseys, but the amount of waste involved, especially when you think some of this kit is like never being used. It's never even making it out of the packaging. And then just is burnt. I mean, it's ludicrous when you think about it and you put it in that way. But how do you think that clubs can really lean into these solutions more? I know they have the opportunity to kind of upcycle, but do you think that there's a mindset problem? Do you think it's a logistical problem? What do you think will be the catalyst to change?
I think one, putting a more of a spotlight on the topic within a club. Like you mentioned, it's very siloed. So I think people with the right influence internally or towards a kit supplier don't really know this problem, aren't aware of the problem, aren't aware of the costs involved with it, because also storing it and destroying it costs big money, and it's coming back every year again and again. So I think that's one. That's why, again, we like to put a spotlight on the topic and then say, hey, we are one of the solutions that you could venture into. And the other one would be, of course, when the brands come on board, we talked to one of the suppliers recently, the global team, one of the bigger ones, and we said to them, okay, if you would like to move forward on this topic, but you don't want to do it yourself because it's not your core business, it takes too much time away from the new product, etc. I get that, but why not carve out a upcycle playbook and give it to the clubs and say, okay, guys, we know that this is a topic with you and an issue with you. This is what we approve of. This is what we support. These are type of partners we approve of and we support because we know how they produce and how they make their product. Please have a look. And if you'd like, go work with them on the topic. Because often our clubs still, even if they want, they're like a little bit hesitant on what is the position of the brand. And you see clubs who with the same brand say, well, I don't care, it's my jersey.
Yep.
With the brand, if we take the brand off, my fans still want to buy my jersey, so it's my shirt. And other brands or other clubs are more of, no, I want to have them on board. I want to have their approval, and that's sometimes a bit difficult. I think another one that's more from the retail merchandise side within the club. Often they're used to getting 250, 300, 400% margins on generic merchandise. So they buy into a big container of, I don't know, wash bags made in Vietnam, mono-branded with their logo, source it for 3, 4, 5 euros, sell it for 15, 16, 17, something like that. Our products cost more. And you can't have 300% margins and expect fans to buy into a bespoke, unique, upcycled item. So there's a limit on the value you can give that. So if you make 150, 200% margin, my discussion point would be that's still a very reasonable margin with product that you normally would destroy. And now you can sell it and tell the story about what you're doing to be more sustainable. So I think the business model within merchandise and retail is often also a threshold for more on the retail side for people to get on board because they take their average margins across the business to project it on upcycling, and that's difficult.
But I think there's a lot of value that can be created through that storytelling aspect, and I think it's something, it's hard to quantify, but actually when you do it right, it's so special and it really engages fans. Um, we have been to many sports sustainability conferences, and I find the narrative is very much around improving stadiums and fan travel. That's going to be the solution, and that's how sport is going to play its part. Both of those things don't really affect the business model. Um, they are guidance that we can give to our clubs. How much of a priority do you think apparel is? Because in my experience, it's quite down low on the list of those priorities. But actually, when I look at the emissions that it produces and the fact that those emissions are hidden because it's within the supply chain, it is, like you say, almost this I don't want to say ticking time bomb, but it's this thing that isn't being addressed. But through legislation and, through growing awareness, the clubs are really going to have to take care of this.
Yeah, and it's a reoccurring problem, right? So it's each season the same problem will pop up. So why not find a solution that you can then implement each year over to improve it? But I also think, clubs struggle to talk about sustainability to their fan base. To be honest, if a fan somewhere in London goes to the club, can just buy its season ticket or not even buy its season ticket, what would they care of the solar panels on the roof of the training center? Of the cutting of single-use plastic in the stadium? And I'm not saying that's not important. It is, but it's in the business of the club itself. Then for the fan, they don't really care. That's my opinion and my experience. But once you take the kit, what is the most single tangible piece of the club a fan can get, and that they can wear and feel and take back home, and then you talk about sustainability through the jersey, with the jersey in the centerpiece of the topic, and then tell, okay, sorry, normally we would destroy this. We're going to bring it back to the homes of the biggest admirers, to the fans, because we are more sustainable. So it's also maybe not the biggest problem within the club, but it is a major problem, and it can give you an edge on, fan engagement and fan involvement, sponsorship involvement on the topic of sustainability, because it's so tangible, because people get it, they get why you're doing this. And I think that's the value, like you mentioned, you can't really put a price on, but that I would really argue that that's something that's being overlooked, apart from selling a new commercial value, apart from a brand asset, etc. That value, I think that makes sustainability more relevant to the fan than other topics within the agenda.
I totally agree. And I think the stats are something like it's $500 billion, which is lost because of underutilization of clothing. And yet circular business models such as repair and resale and upcycling are worth $700 billion by 2030. So it is a hugely profitable area, especially when we think essentially this is a waste product. And it's really kind of rethinking about how we consider waste and how we use that waste. I wanted to kind of hear about some of the projects that you've got coming up, because I know you're super busy. I feel like I am seeing your product everywhere, which is fantastic. And seeing so many people talk about you, because you've been so innovative and you've really managed to engage stakeholders in this in a way that gets them on board. I think sometimes sustainability, it could come across not as preachy, but as insincere. Sometimes people say it's incongruent, when we see all the success and then you talk to us about sustainability. I think, in my opinion, sustainability now is not a choice. It's about strategic future-proofing your business. And I think more clubs are understanding that. But can you talk to us more about some upcoming projects and what you've got going on?
Sure. So I just mentioned the FC Utrecht case. I think that's a very good example of how clubs can create new value from something that they would normally say as a hassle. Changing kit sponsor or main sponsor during the season, it's a headache. Nobody likes that, but they really turn it around to a storytelling and value piece. I think that's an important one, and we just kicked off with the first collection, and there's many more coming. So that's pretty cool. I think another one which is a showcase, and it's also because I came from the federation, so it makes it a little bit easier. But what we're doing with the Dutch FA at the moment, it's not just upcycling a collection and then we're done. We're really having created an upcycle scheme throughout the year for the next 2 seasons, so that where we anytime a kit becomes obsolete, it's being upcycled already. So throughout the season, we have fan collections coming out, but also B2B gifting, Christmas gifting this year, meaning that we really have a circular and year through scheme going on. And we'd love to explore more of those with other federations, because I think that for the federation, it's a kit switch every 2 years, so it's an easier cycle. I think that's pretty cool. We've got a couple of coming out. I'm not going to mention yet. Of course, we often say we are just a ingredient brand of the solution, and the club needs to take the spotlight and tell the story first. And once they launch, then we will. But we're also venturing out into not only apparel, but event branding, event bannering, signage for one of the biggest football competitions in Europe. So it's cool to see that the solution we have, starting out from jerseys, is now being used for shorts, jackets, event branding, flags, bibs. All that product is now being upcycled by us, and I think that's also something we'd like to highlight in the future. That it's not just that jersey; it's everything that a club basically has that's obsolete after a season, or outdated after a season.
That's amazing, because event signage must be absolutely huge. Like, there must be so much wastage there.
Yeah, and there's often a date on there, or two club logos on there, and if they're out of the competition, who's going to use that banner again? So nobody. And it's all polyester as well, or PVC, materials you don't really want lying around. So yeah, there's still much to do there as well.
And I guess you're able to use the same supply chains, the same studios in order to do that. So it just makes sense, right?
Exactly. And sometimes it's even crafting new products. So we're now going to use PVC branding, which is a very hard plastic materials, for upcycled footballs. And it looks cool, but it's also durable. So it's also, a very cool gift to give away. So we keep exploring.
I am so excited for your future, because every time I speak to you, there's always more and more innovation. You never stop. You continue to build on everything that you're doing. And this series is about 5 women who work throughout different stages of the supply chain. And I'm always really curious about the person behind, the brand, because I do think it takes a certain type of individual to have the courage to go and say, look, I think we can do things better. I've got another solution. So I just kind of wanted to dig into what motivates you. I know you're a mom and you're so passionate about that. How do you balance it all? What keeps you going? Any tips for any of us?
Well, it really started out with, being fed up with the solution for the apparel. I'm a football fan first and foremost. Also when I was working with the Dutch FA, I really like football shirts, so I'm a fan. So I think that's where it started for me on this topic. And then, yeah, of course, maybe a little bit cheesy, but your kids come in because you see, okay, they get, and they're 4 and 6, or too young, but they get in school already all these very cool classes on the environment, on electrical cars, solar panels, all that kind of those themes we didn't get when we were younger. And of course, I'm going to get the question in the next couple of years, Mom, what are you doing for, to create a better planet? And I know, again, this is very cheesy, but it motivates me as well to create something that I can say, well, I tried my best. I hope I did my part on being better than what we did before in the area where I'm good at, football and the sports industry. And what keeps me going is actually I really like what we make, and I like the people we're making it with. So is it easy? No, of course it isn't, because brands are often sometimes arrogant and think they know better. And of course, the longer you're in the industry, and we're getting more showcases in and more clubs on board, so our position is growing and getting stronger every partnership we have. But still, sometimes we also lie awake and think of, okay, what if one of the brands will venture out themselves and we're going to be obsolete because they did it themselves. because we are very transparent, because we show what we do and where we do it and who makes it and how it's being made. Yeah, are we offering potential competitors an edge by showcasing it and then them leapfrogging over us to, well, that could be, but I'm a very, one, passionate, but also very, my mindset is like, if I'm going to share my knowledge, I know that people are going to come back to me and want to work with me. And not just because what we make, but also the people who are behind the company and the passion that they showcase in how we make the product. So I truly believe that if you're putting the right energy in, you're getting the right energy back into that. And last and not least, but I've got a very supportive husband who is also the co-founder, but also has a full-time job next to next to FC88. So he's also my motivation and my support system there to get everything sorted. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so important to have that kind of ecosystem of support around you. But one of the words that I wrote down was integrity, and I think you can worry about other businesses coming and kind of taking your idea and doing it themselves. But I feel like with the level of due diligence and the integrity that you put into the brand, people can't copy that. They can't copy the craftsmanship and the level of knowledge and detail that you put into building those studios and making sure that every person who touched that product is engaged with it. For a lot of people who work in your studios, it's not just a job. They're doing it because of purpose. And I know you personally go and kind of visit them and you have that personal relationship. And I don't think bigger brands necessarily are as that engaged in their supply chain as you are. And I think that is what makes it so unique. And from a fan point of view, actually, just to tell that story that, these hands have touched this shirt and they've transformed it, rather than doing what 90% of the clubs are still doing, which is burning their old kit. I mean, if you...
Yeah. And I also do feel that, even if there would be competitors, and I'm often just, I'm very supportive of people doing this, there's so much ways to give a better life. So there's so much to do. And of course, textile recycling is coming in the next years somewhere, but then still there will be enough to do. Also because through upcycling and the way we do it, we often keep the emotional value of the original product alive instead of, bringing it back to a new yarn or bringing it back to felt or anything like that. And I'm glad you mentioned integrity. So I feel that if we're doing it in the right way, then people would want to work with us, not because they don't have any options, but because they feel like these are the right people. They know our target group. They've got so much knowledge gathered over the last years, and I hopefully they will say. And I also like them. I like their energy. I like the way they think. So I think that's a very important non-tangible USP we'd like to bring into the brand. Yeah.
And if you can kind of go back and give yourself one piece of advice, as Nicole, who's working at the Dutch FA, who had just kind of come across this problem, what would that be?
Oof. I think getting expert people from the, manufacturing industry on board sooner. Because I drove to a city nearby with 5 jerseys in the back, asking her to make a bag, which cost me 250 euros to make, with a piece of very cool bio leather, etc. But I'm like, this is not going to work. So I would say, please go and reach out to people with more knowledge on that part of the making part and in that industry sooner than trying to Poland, Romania, Turkey, and then coming back to Portugal. Yeah.
Yeah. To know that there are experts who can help you and that you don't have to do this yourself.
Yes. No.
I think clubs are realizing that this is a problem, and instead of trying to solve it themselves, I think, what you were doing is a perfect solution. And like I say, the integrity that goes into those new products is so great and adds that emotional value to the fan. It builds on the history and the heritage of that shirt. I just wondered if there's anything else that you wanted to cover before we wrap up.
No, just keep your eyes out for one of the very cool UK-based collaborations. We have a studio in Brighton, and we're working on something pretty cool now in the studio. No, and if I'm going to say more, you're going to know who it is. But hopefully that will be out too, because it tells a story about local made by the right people cool product, and a very big club in the UK. And I hope that could be also a showcase for us in the UK market. Yeah.
Amazing. And that will be out, I guess, in the next few months, or?
Yeah, I think sooner. I think beginning April, that should be launched.
Amazing. I will definitely keep my eyes out for that. I could talk to you all day, Nicole. It's such an inspiring conversation. And I always really love hearing from you because you've got so much passion and energy in what you do. So thank you so much. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Jo.